let's mobilize folk to vote. If we don't mobilize people to vote, we're not gonna get anything done. So we got to make sure folk are registered to vote, and then that they folk get to the polls so that they can vote. And I truly believe that if we do that and we get those folk registered that can vote and then get them to the polls, I don't care how many suppression tactics they have in the state of Florida.
That's right.
We can win every race.
Every race.
So let's do the work. Let's do it and let's get it done. Okay. I'm not going to belabor the hour, but I'm going to follow the program as friend. And thank you all for letting me be here tonight. I'm supposed to be in Tampa at a conference, but I'm going as soon as I leave here. I'm going. Well, I got one more stop after this one. But we're going to support. You're going to support Rodney all that we can. So tonight we have some expressions from our Councilman Ira Bethea, our McCullough City Council District 2, and then Colonel Goran Black, the 3rd U.S. Army retired. And I don't see Bishop Stockton here, but I imagine he'll be here. And then Henry DeGenesti, our retired Director of Public Safety, New Jersey Port Authority. And then I'll come back with our candidate, present our candidate. Mr. Whitfield Jenkins will do that.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. It is good to see that the citizens of Ocala County is interested in those that come out that want to represent them in all levels of government. Tonight, Mr. Rodney Long is here to share his vision for the position of Senator of District 8. District 8 runs through 3 counties, Putnam, Alachua, and Marion. Mr. Long has long been a voice for the people. That's right. I can stand here and share many accomplishments of Mr. Long, but I know there are others that can come and share that information. I just would like to share that about 12 years ago, I was elected to a committee, and in that committee, when I got there was a lot of things going on, left and right and left.
Okay.
People really just was not together. And you try to impress whatever it is that you had going, goals and objectives. And we were just not reaching that. So I spoke to a few people, and they kept coming up with Rodney Long, Rodney Long, Rodney Long. So I did. I called Mr. Long. We had a conversation for about 45 minutes. And once I got through talking to Mr. Long, I went and put what he told me into action. And things, the wheels began to turn. And that was the first time that I really interacted with Mr. Long. On other occasions, I reached out to Mr. Long, and he was never too busy to engage in a conversation with me, to share wisdom, share his experience, and share his knowledge. The voters of Marion, Alachua, and Putnam counties need someone who is qualified, experienced, and have a proven record of success. He is prepared to serve in the legislature and to address the critical issues facing District 8 and the state of Florida. I am here to support Mr. Rodney Long in his campaign, and I thank you for this opportunity to share.
Amen. Thank you, my brother.
Settled in, because I got about 5 hours worth of stuff to talk
Oh boy.
Mr. Long, I'd like to wish you the very best and introduce myself. I'm Goran Black, and I live here in Ocala. It's a rough place to live. Madam Mayor, it's nice to see you here tonight, and to everybody else that came here tonight. That's right. What I'm going to talk about, though, Mr. Long, is some things that I've seen that I'm going to lay at your feet as the stuff that you and others are going to have to do to keep this world safe. Okay? And it's not going to be easy either. Over half of my entire life has been spent living and working in the United States Army. Over half my life. And I'm getting to be an old man, and my body tells me I'm an old man now. 2 tours of duty in the Republic of Vietnam found me and almost 1 million other Americans fighting for the honored word democracy. We haven't found it yet. The current times that I think I'm living in remind me of the 60s and my days as a student and eventually a graduate of Howard University. The guy that lived next door to me at Howard was a guy named Stokely Carmichael. Up and coming young man.
Stokely Carmichael from Howard.
In my class was a gentleman by the name of Dion Diamond who flew the coop at Howard and started catching buses to come down south here. Beaten unmercifully one time in Alabama. So racism in my lifetime, Mr. Long, has been livid, both in the civilian and the military side of my life. My father, who was also in the military, would say, son, not much has changed today, but the day and the time.
That's right.
And somebody needs to do something about it. Democracy is losing its delightful flavor. It's just losing it. And what have so many of us fought and died for is my question. Why? Is there anything we can do that is not considered black while, fill in the blank? Black while, and fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. A person of color, that's good, blank, while doing things. If I, or anyone that I know in my circle of friends, carried an AR-15 down Main Street during a violent protest,
Lord have mercy.
we surely would have been shot.
Don't know that, brother. Sure enough.
At least once. And a lot of folks don't understand that AR-15 isn't really an automatic weapon. You have to keep pulling the trigger on it. Mm-hmm. But it's being portrayed as a weapon of war. It is. You can hurt a lot of people with it. But I sure am not going to be allowed to walk down the streets of Ocala with an AR-15 strapped to my chest. That's right. And a magazine full of bullets in that weapon. And if we follow our heart and stop and think about what our doctors are saying, Henry and I were just talking about this. The biggest order my doctor tells me is take care of yourself. Stop doing crazy things if you're doing them. Well, I don't. But what if somebody came up to me and said, stop, boy, I want to talk to you. And all I'm doing is jogging. I surely would have been shot. No ifs, ands, and buts about that. But what if we had something that just recently happened, a small, black, beautiful female child was sitting with her white mother on a Southwest plane and got turned in for smuggling and engaging in sex trafficking because her child didn't look like the mother. My Lord. Ms. Long, we can't deal with that.
That's right.
We got to stop that kind of nonsense because there are plenty of white folk out here that have a white child and a black child.
That's right.
And there are plenty of black people out here that have white children.
Mixed families. Mm-hmm.
I sure as hell don't want to get on Southwest Airline on Thursday morning and have that plane not go because somebody in there is sitting with a child that doesn't look like them. I mean, I paid my money to go from point A to point B, and that's all I want to do. What if we enter our legal home and we're far too often have to go beyond proof to prove to law enforcement that it's ours? If I have a key to the house, pretty much you can assume that's my house. But I've got to sit up there and argue with law enforcement that what I'm getting ready to do isn't against the law? Ms. Long, that's part of what we got to ask you not to let happen anymore. And when we graduate from college and receive a commission in the United States Armed Forces, that means you become an officer after you graduate from college. And this just happened 2 weeks ago. Our new military ID card was thought to be fraudulent because a black 23-year-old female who really was a second lieutenant in the Army was told at a southern casino that she could not come in. Now that really bothers me. And that goes back to my military stuff. Here she got a military ID card, and you can't go in there and lose your money, because that's all you're going to do.
Apartheid.
Because they don't think you are real, at 23 years old, and a black female on to boot. And finally, as Mr. Bethea, my great fraternity brother, knows, you have a black city manager cannot fire personnel that work for her for not complying with her edicts. I had a chance to get up and speak at that meeting that night, and I just wanted to know if everybody in there was crazy, and I didn't want to put on my southern voice, because I would have said something like, is you all losing your minds here? Is you nuts? Or is you crazy? And then I would have thought to be crazy myself. Ms. Long, there's something I wanted to read to you that's from a very dear poet friend of mine named Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
Who in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn says, right is right, wrong is wrong, and a body ain't got no business doing wrong when he ain't ignorant and knows better. Ms. Long, we got a lot of ignorant folk out there, but they do know better.
No better.
Do your thing, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, my friend.
Elijah, I want to run a name by you. Do you know who the first black police chief was?
Atkins Warren.
Atkins Warren.
Yeah, my good friend Atkins Warren from D.C.
No, he came from St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis, Missouri. That's right.
He was the deputy chief. I know Atkins because Atkins and I were actually the charter members of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement.
He used to talk about that all the time.
Smart guy.
Noble.
Smart guy. Noble. Well, I'm just going to talk a few minutes about some things I think you need to deal with here in Ocala and Marion County. Both the sheriff here, Billy Woods, and the new chief don't like to hear me speak, and especially don't like any letters from me. I've been trying to meet with Billy Woods since he became the sheriff. Myself and Gorham were on a committee, citizens committee of the county and the sheriff's department. And after Emery Gainey,
Emery.
the interim for a year.
From Gainesville.
From Gainesville. When our former Sheriff Blair was indicted for some crimes, he came in to try and right the ship. And he formed the Citizens Committee. And he did a super job. But then he left. He said, I can't stay here for a lot of reasons I won't go into. And Woods got in. Woods has not had a meeting with this committee since he got in, because we asked tough questions. But let me just give you some concerns that I have about the safety of all of us here in Ocala and Marion County. Most people even in the city don't realize that when you take a look at all the cities throughout the state of Florida, we're in the top 3 per capita of serious crime. We have more crime here per capita than Gainesville, which has 3 times the population. So I'm asking you, you're going to need to deal with that. You're going to have to. And the sheriff, and I say it in public all the time, he lies about the statistics.
Amen.
He lies about it. See, he knows nothing about community policing. He knows nothing about reaching out to the community. And I'm going to embarrass somebody who was running for mayor, and that was one of her tenets in terms of her mayor's race to deal with the crime problem here. We are sweeping it under the rug. I have lost track in Ocala of the amount of murders, the amount of shootings that have taken place this year. I don't know what the total number is, but for a city our size, it's probably in the top 3 in the state of Florida. But all of this is swept under the rug. That's something that you have to deal with. I am tired. I've been here now. I've owned a home here 25 years, lived here 15 years, and I have seen these things just deteriorate. We were talking not so long ago about more people moving in, more people moving in. But you know what's happening? A lot of the young people that grow up here, especially those of color, they leave because they don't see the real opportunities here. It's a dynamic community and it's a dynamic city because they know what's going on under the underbelly. The drug problem with fentanyl and opioids is skyrocketing.
Every community.
All you have to do is go into the forest. I can go in there right now and I can find drug dens. And you know who doesn't do anything about it? And I'm on record with this, the Sheriff's Department. Those are things that when you get elected, you really need to focus in on because Ocala and Marion County, because of the World Equestrian Center, is on the spotlight. They're on the spotlight. People are going to be coming here from all over the United States and all over the world. But if this crime problem continues, we're really going to get a real bad reputation because you know what? People are going to start to say, we made a mistake. Why are we coming here? Because when they start to get mugged, when they start to get held up on the roads and on the highways, it'll be the politicians that will have to answer. And you need to be out front with this. So, you know, you've got a lot of things you need to do. But if you don't make this a safe community, and you don't make it a community where everybody feels safe, I'm just going to give you a side story too, like my friend the Colonel does. I was in police work for 25 years in the New York, New Jersey area. And then I went and I was fortunate enough to work for a financial firm and did okay. And I moved down here, and I'll say that I live in an all-white neighborhood, okay? The first time in my life I've ever been stopped by the police and given a summons was by the Marion County Sheriff's Department that followed me where I was doing 40 miles an hour in a 40-mile zone to where I had to make a left turn into where I lived. And all of a sudden the lights come on. 12 noon, the sun was just rising. And I stopped and I said, okay, I can see he's behind me. He comes out of his car and he walks up to me and he's got his gun out, deputy sheriff. Got his gun out, so I'm sitting in the car. Now, I'll tell you this, I had a Jaguar. I like fancy cars. And I says, what's up, deputy? He says, you were speeding. What do you mean I was speeding? I had my left turn signal on. He says, did you hear what I said? You were speeding. It just so happened I had my retired chief shield on me. So I said, well, you know, I'm retired. He said, I don't care who you are. He says, I said you were speeding. And why are you going in there? And I says, I live in there. No, you can't live in there. I says, well, you see the car I have and then you see that 90-foot driveway? That's my house. You're a wise guy. And if you say anything else, I'm going to lock you up. End of story. He gave me a summons for speeding 60 miles in a 40-mile zone. It just so happened I knew the sheriff at the time, a fellow by the name of Ed Dean.
He was a Democrat.
Okay, that's right.
He was a Democrat.
But what made it even more interesting, at the time I was also a commissioner on the National Commission for Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies. And I had presented their accreditation to Ed Dean a year before, just when he got appointed.
Right.
Because Urgel was thrown out. Got a lot of good people.
I know a lot of it.
But anyhow, so I called Ed and I said, I want to come see you. He said, oh, you're here this weekend? Because I wasn't coming down all the time. I go up to his office and I tell him the story. He said, oh, Jesus, they messed with you? I said, yeah, this guy was lying. So he called him in off the road, I must say that. Ed was a stand-up guy. And right in front of me, he suspended him for 2 days. But I said, Ed, what are you going to do with a person like that? He says, you know, my hands are tied. He says, we really can't do much. This is one of the good old boys, and he knows a lot of people, and he's been around for a long time, and he's a lieutenant. So you have a lot ahead of you, and you've got some heavy lifting to do.
Thank you, Councilman DeFay and Colonel Black and Mr. DeGenesty. Rodney, as you see, there's a lot to be done. A lot more that needs to be done. And I'm going to come from a different angle. Because I'm a lot younger than, I'm probably the youngest one in this room. But I'm still half a century old. And I want to say this from an educational point. We still got issues with our schools.
Oh, yes.
We still got to make sure that we're educating these kids and preparing them to go to the next level. And we have so many issues that are going on, and we need somebody that's in that Florida Senate that's willing to speak on educational issues, that's willing to make sure that every kid in Marion County gets equitable education. And I'm just going to leave it at that. We have a lot of educators in this room that know where the shortcomings are and know that it's not equal across the board. When you can't go to, when the school sits across the street from your house and you can't go to that school, there's issues.
We got them in Gainesville too.
So we got some work to do. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce my frat brother, Whitfield Jenkins, the president of the Liberation Ocala African American Council, who will present our candidate for tonight.
Quickly acknowledge all of my friends that are here tonight. I have had the opportunity to work with so many of you on real important issues in this community. I'm sitting there kind of quiet because naturally I think we all were really hoping for a turnout, a much larger turnout tonight because of the nature of this issue. We just have to continue to do our work in terms of trying to solve the problems of our community. I've learned over a period of time that sometimes when things don't go your way, you have a tendency to get frustrated, and sometimes you even get to the point where you think that you want to walk off the battlefield. But when you look at those people who came before us, when I think of my daddy, who was born in 1881 and died in 1984, 103 years old, and know what he went through to pave the way for me to be standing before you tonight, it's difficult for me to walk off the battlefield. Tonight, we once again have an opportunity to do something very special and very great. The young man who's here with us tonight is our candidate. Loretta and I have had the privilege of knowing him many years. I almost want to go back and use the year of 1984 when we met Rodney. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to tell you what it was. I got elected the president of the Marion County branch of NAACP in 1984, and we were not doing very well here locally in terms of activism. But we got some news of a young guy over in Gainesville that had a position with the Lachue County branch NAACP. And at that time, he was not the president. He had a position, they created a position that was not in the national Constitution. And it was, Rodney, what was that position called?
Executive Secretary.
Executive Secretary. No such position existed for a unit in the National Association. But
it does now.
What Rodney did over there, he took that position, and you can go back and find out they elected a black mayor named Ed Jennings back in that time period of Alachua, Florida. And you can just follow it on down in terms of they have had elected black leaders in every position of government, including the sheriff of Alachua County is a black man today. And you will find that Rodney has been a part of all of that political dynamics and those persons in that community, and he continues today. And Loretta and I we have been a friend, and we made a decision we would support him on his previous campaign, and we are right back here now on the front line to support him on this campaign. And all of you got a copy of his brochure that talks about his local experience, his national experience, his civic involvement, his state experience, and his professional development. And none of this is manufactured. When I read it, I know, because I've been in line with Rodney all these years from Ocala, Marion County, and Gainesville. So at this time, I just want to just be able to bring Rodney on and let him know how much I respect him and appreciate him, and respect for the commitment that he is giving for the people of these 3 counties. Rodney?
Thank you, Whitfield. First, let me give honor to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who is the head of my life and to whom all blessings flow. I want to thank my good friend Whitfield. Whitfield, it doesn't seem like it's been 40-something plus years, but it has been 40 plus years, and I'm half his age. Whitfield and I go back a long way, and Loretta, we go back a long, long way. And there are a lot of battles that we fought in Gainesville, Alachua County, and similar battles here in Marion County that we fought. We won a lot, we lost some, but we strategized to come back to find out ways to win and win again and win again and win again. So I want to thank you and Loretta for your friendship over the years and for trusting in me and allowing me at the age, I think, of 24 to come and speak to your banquet back in those days. So you can see how young I was when I got started in civic involvement. The first commitment that I had as a young person was the NAACP, because I knew what the NAACP stood for, and I knew what it meant. And at the time, the NAACP in America was the only organization that didn't bite its tongue when it came to change and injustice in America. And I knew that. And you're right, we did create a position. But to me, creating the position allowed me the flexibility to be able to confront and to intermingle with the policymakers, because I had a great relationship with policymakers. And when I spoke on behalf of the NAACP, the policymakers knew that I was speaking on behalf of the NAACP. But let me give you a little bit of background about me before I got to become the executive director of the NAACP. I graduated from high school in 1974. I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. to Howard University. I was up there in 1976, and the reason I remember 1976 is because the year 1976, 2 things happened. Jimmy Carter was elected. That's the first time I ever voted. And Richard Pryor had an album called The Bicentennial Inn. Y'all figure that out. So I was in D.C. at the time, and the mayor of D.C. at the time was Marion Barry. So I got a good history about Washington, D.C. and politics in Washington, D.C. at a very, very, very young age. And Marion Barry is probably one of the most interesting elected officials I've ever seen in all my life. And he believed in getting things done. And the reason he got it done because he took care of his people. And that's one thing I learned about politics. You got to take care of your people. And if you take care of your people, they'll take care of you. And I learned that at a very early age. I got the opportunity to go to Howard University, University of Florida, and also Adula Bible College. So I've had the opportunity to get a great education. But I was like one of 8 people that a single family mom raised in a place called Porter's in Gainesville, Florida. And they used to call it the bucket of blood because every Friday, Saturday night, there was going to be a bucket of blood. That's just how rough the neighborhood and the community was. And I came out of the ghetto, but there's a saying, just because you've come from a ghetto doesn't mean that the ghetto is in you.
That's right.
And I learned that the only way that you can do that and get away from being from a ghetto was to make sure that you weren't ghetto. And so that was a challenge growing up in my neighborhood, because if you were educated and people thought you were smart, back in those days, you weren't very well received. So you had to play both sides of the fence. You had to act dumb around your friends, and you had to learn how to matriculate and how to be able to assimilate with others. And I learned how to do that very, very well. I went to all black schools until I got to Lincoln High School, which was the school that I wanted to graduate from because that was the pride of our community. But I got caught up in integration in the 1972. So I was forced to integrate, to go to a school I had never heard of before, walk through neighborhoods where they put dogs on you, call you the N-word, and my life for 2 years was disrupted because of integration. That is the worst thing that happened to our black education system, integration. And I say that everywhere I go and speak. Because we lost pride, we lost the opportunity to have teachers who cared about you, who knew your mom, who knew your dad. And there was no such thing as a failing child when I was in school. We didn't have no achievement gaps when I was in school. So I understood what it was to, one, come from an all-black neighborhood and assimilate with whites, and also to go to a high school that didn't want you. The first day at the middle school I went to, on the plaza was a big rebel flag, say, "Go home, niggers." That was the first time I had really experienced racism at the age of about 13. And it hurt me because I didn't want to be there anyway. And then we were being called things that we shouldn't have been called. But that's how life was in 1970, 71, 72. And I can imagine in Ocala it was probably worse. Or, because I remember Howard High School, you all got integrated at the same time that Lincoln High School got integrated. Because you remember the decree came down, and Florida and Georgia, especially Florida, was one of the last states to implement desegregation under Brown versus the Board of Education. And it wasn't a decree to close black schools. The boards decided it was politically expedient to close black schools than to close white schools. So all throughout Florida, all the black high schools were closed, and we were bused to schools. And some of y'all may remember that experience. I'm not the only one. I'm young, so some of y'all remember the experience with me. But to me, I always wanted to be a leader. And at the age of 13, I opened my first business. It was a lawn service. I convinced my mom to buy a lawnmower. I said, "Mom, if you buy a lawnmower, I can buy my school clothes, I can buy my brother's school clothes, because you working hard, you can't take care of all of us, but I can cut lawns in the neighborhood every summer and we can buy school clothes." Mama bought me a lawnmower. I hooked it up to my bicycle. I was able to get lawns in the yard and hired my brothers and cousins to work the business while I got the business. So that was the first opportunity I understood about being an entrepreneur at the age of 13, 14, 15. So I bought my own clothes and I became independent in that regard. And to me, I always wanted to be a business person. So that's why I own several businesses today, because I never wanted to work for anybody. I wanted to work for myself. If I work for myself, I have the freedom to say and do what I please to do without people having to have something on you. Because you know how it is when you work for these government jobs. You can only say so much when you work for the government. Right. And I learned that going through life. So when I got the opportunity to give to the community, not only through the NAACP, I organized and founded the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, because Martin Luther King Jr. was an idol to me. I read all his materials. I didn't agree with his methodology of change, because back in those days, Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, Angela Davis, Malcolm X were the people who I thought was the closest to what I believe back in those days about what was going on. Martin Luther King Jr., to me, seemed to be a little soft from what I was going through. But I began to study and to read about him. And I thought about it. Now, nonviolent social change is very difficult to actually be able to go through, because we look what it took to get it. It took us too long to get it. But if we had done the things like the H. Rap Brown and others wanted to do, we probably wouldn't have existed. So we had to do it nonviolently through social change. And Martin Luther King became my idol. And so I started an organization, the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. And that organization, along with the NAACP back in the 80s, changed my community. Because everybody could understand who Martin Luther King Jr. was. Who would be against Martin Luther King Jr. and civil rights, equal rights, human rights? So through that organization, we did a lot of things. A lot of it was symbolic. We changed 441 from Marion County up to Columbia County in honor of Dr. King. It's the longest named highway today in America in honor of Dr. King. We have the Martin Luther King Memorial downtown. We have weeks of activities for Martin Luther King. Some of you have been to many of our activities. But one of the things that I focused on was education, because I understood the value and the importance of education. So we started in honor of one of our founding members, the Edna Hart Keeper of the Dream Scholarship Award. And every year we give out a minimum $7,500 scholarship to a senior every year. Today we're giving out close to $500,000 for education, because I'm committed to education and sowing into young people's lives about making a change. And we started that in 1989, and it still exists today. So when it comes to education, I'm committed to education. We got problems with education. First of all, we're not funding education the way it needs to be funded. That's the first thing. And it started in 1988 when we passed the lottery. We passed the lottery in 1988, and the bill of sale of the lottery was, it's going to supplement education. Go back and look and see the trend line of public dollars going to education from 88 up until now. That's right. It's been supplemented. It has not been enhanced, as they say it. So we've stopped. We are 46 in the nation when it comes to funding right now today, our public school system. We're down to the bottom with Mississippi and Arkansas. One of my goals as the next senator, in the next 8 years I'll be there, is to bring Florida to the top 10 percentile when it comes to public funding with education. That's good. That's one of my first priorities in going to Tallahassee. The second thing when it comes to public education is, many of us don't like charter schools. But the majority party in Tallahassee love charter schools, and if it was left up to them, there wouldn't be no public education system. So that horse has left the barn. So what we got to do is we got to make sure that we hold charter schools and these parochial schools to the same standards that we hold our public schools to. So as the next state senator, I will make sure that we do that. Because we're going to fund them. There's nothing that we can do. We're not in the control of that. So they're going to do that. But we got to hold them accountable to make sure that they have the same standard that we have in public school system. We need to fund our teachers. Giving a teacher a $1,000 bonus a year is utterly ridiculous. Teaching is the hardest profession there is right now. And the children today are the hardest to teach that I've ever seen in my life. They're harder to teach, and you don't pay them. So the reason we have problems is most of our kids don't come to school ready to learn. So we got to start making sure that our children at an early age get early education. We got to fund that. But we have to find other creative ways. I don't have a problem with charter schools. There are some great charter schools. We got a charter school in Gainesville. Karen and Sharon is one of the top charter schools in the country. But they specialize from 1st through 5th grade. And that's where you got to catch these kids at. When they get to 6th or 7th grade, they got a mind of their own. And then now we look at the criminal justice piece. We look at the juvenile justice piece, and that's where the children of the age of 12 to 13 and 14 are matriculating to. You know that 3rd grade, They can determine how many prison beds to build based upon the reading level of third graders. We got to change that dynamic, and we got to change it earlier. So we got to start targeting kids in early childhood development, teaching them to read and teaching them the things they need to do. So hopefully we don't be building more prison beds and having this private industry of prison being the criminal justice system budget in the state of Florida is the #1 budget in the state of Florida. I want to change that dynamic. And the way we change that dynamic is change the paradigm of how you're funding. You need to fund education on the front end and not change and funding the criminal justice system on the back end. You hold people accountable, and that's the problem we have in Tallahassee right now. We're not holding people accountable. So you can best believe, Colonel, you were saying earlier about the problems that need to be fixed. You were talking about the sheriff. I promise you, as the senator, I don't have a problem getting the audience with them holding them accountable. Because see, I don't work for the government, but I can speak truth to power. Because the same people that elect him will elect me. And my microphone will be bigger than his, because my mouth's going to be bigger than his. So I don't have a problem about holding people accountable about what they're not doing. See, I know all the shenanigans of what happens down here and some of the things that have happened over the years. I know Dean, I know the guy who got indicted. I know all of them. And I believe when you said what you said, all of us have had a similar experience of driving while black. Going to your own neighborhood. What are you doing out here? I said you were speeding. And if you didn't know Ed Dean, he probably wouldn't even got the 2-day suspension that he got.
I would have put a bullet in the sheriff's head.
I believe you.
Well, I'm from New York.
I believe you.
I'm saying a lot of nice things, but you know, sometimes you see, I was almost a Black Panther. I enjoyed what you said.
I get it.
So I love what you're saying.
I understand. When we're speaking of the criminal justice system, we hear buzzwords like police reform. It's just a buzzword, police reform. That's all it is, a buzzword, just a nice bumper sticker, police reform. That's all it is. But see, you got to understand that police reform begins with the first contact when you come in contact with law enforcement. That's where it starts. And the only way that you can start having reform is that you got to have reforms when people intermingle on when you first come in contact with a person. You can't have the attitude that every person of color has committed a crime. We got to have de-escalating tactics. We got to make sure that people have an understanding of how to approach people. When you pull up to somebody's car, it's your demeanor that put young people today on the defensive. They're not going to be like I was coming up, yes ma'am, yes sir. That day is gone with young black people. If you come up to them today and you disrespect them, they got guns too. And they're not afraid to die because they don't fear anything. But we shouldn't have to have our young kids to die by just driving a car and getting shot and getting killed. We're the only race of people who have to teach our children, our young black men, how to survive when they get stopped by the police. That is ridiculous, but that's a survival tactic that we all have to do. So what do? Police reform starts at the first contact. So we got to make sure that in state law that we have de-escalation tactics, and we got to be able to work with the Florida Sheriff Association and the Police Association to make sure that they understand this is how we diffuse situations when it comes to police reform. Because on the back end, you're too late on the back end when somebody's shot, somebody's dead, we in the street hollering Black Lives Matter. To me, all lives matter. So the way we deal with it, we got to make sure up front we deal with that. The other thing we got to make sure of is we got to have laws that make sure that whenever law enforcement officer, and it's only about 1% of law enforcement that's really bad that make it bad for the other good law enforcement officers, but we got to make sure that whenever crimes or things happen when it comes to especially excessive use of force, we got to make sure they're held accountable. Now, how do we deal with that? Well, we got to make sure that they don't have this immunity that's been given to them by the Supreme Court that says, well, they don't have a right to do that. It is immoral, some of the things that happen to people of color by law enforcement. And it's not getting any better. In its city, USA, we have these problems. And the reason we have it is because we are too afraid to engage with law enforcement. And the problem is, especially of the last 5 years of the previous president, who has gotten it to make a lot of things fashionable. But things aren't fashionable when it comes to treating people wrong. I believe in equality for all. Regardless of your race, sex, orientation, doesn't matter to me. I believe in equality for everybody. Doesn't matter to me who you marry, doesn't matter. You should be treated with dignity and respect. I believe that. That's one of my core beliefs. Now, if we're going to have that, law enforcement has to understand that they must be held accountable. And those laws are in Tallahassee. Now, how do you hold them accountable? One of the things I want to propose as the next state senator is that we have a special department within the Attorney General's office that will be able to prosecute those officers that run afoul when it comes to excessive use of force. Because it is difficult for an attorney general or district attorney locally to prosecute a person they work with every day. You can't do it. So you got to make sure that there's a special unit that whenever these types of offenses come up, it's referred automatically. And then there's an independent investigation and the chips fall wherever they fall. That's reform. Because I can assure you, whether it's this district or my district, when officers are accused of doing things, unless there's video, unless there's real video, it's not believable. And even video is not 100%. Look at 1991 with Rodney King. We all saw it, but it wasn't believable. Thank God for video with Ahmaud Arbery.
Thank God.
Thank God we had video for him, and he was able to get justice. The other part of the criminal justice reform is you look at the contact, you look at the prosecution part, then you look at who holds all the cards. The prosecutor holds the cards, and the court. The court is under so many strict laws of minimum mandatory, they don't have any discretion at all to do anything. So you got to go back and look at the criminal code to determine what's working and what's not working. We go back to the 1980s when we put all these minimum mandatory laws on the books, especially when we had the crack problem and the drug problem. We know now they don't work. And people who've been the ones who felt the brunt of it, who've been incarcerated, are people of color. So what we got to do is we got to make sure that we look at sentencing reform as a part of the criminal justice system reform. We also got to make sure that we look at who's been incarcerated and the cost of being incarcerated versus the cost of having something different like vocational or educational programs in the penitentiary system. We need to go back to gain time. People shouldn't do 95% of time for worthless checks or filling the worthless checks and those types of crimes. We need to do better. We're spending more money educating people in the criminal justice system than we are educating them in the public school system. We got to do a paradigm shift. The other thing is people going to get out of jail or prison one day. What are they going to do? So if we look at the recidivism rate, it is high because the people who are in there, first of all, they got to check the box when they get out and apply for a job. We need to automatically eliminate the check the box. We need to allow people to be able to get in front of an employee and discuss their problems instead of checking the box and you never get to have an interview. So that's something simple we can do. Eliminate checking the box. And I applaud every institution that's doing that. The University of Florida is doing it and other institutions are doing it. The city of Gainesville has eliminated the box. The school board needs to do it. The city of Ocala needs to eliminate checking the box. A person should, criminal history, okay, you ever been arrested? Yes. You ever had felony? Yes. Yeah. But it was 1969. 69, 50-something years ago. But it's still there. If you can't explain to an employer, I was 14 years old or 15 years old in 1970, and you 60-something years old now, that's still being held against you because your record is still there. So we need to make sure we do that. The other thing is, coming out of the criminal justice system, we got to make sure that people who are coming out have an opportunity to get their life together, which means this. I would propose that a person who's been out of prison, who has 5 years, at least 5 years, and don't have any trouble, they should automatically, number one, should have your rights restored. That's automatic. And I can tell you, Senator Perry messed that all up. Y'all do know it was Senator Perry that messed up Amendment 4 and the implementation of Amendment 4, because the people voted on Amendment 4. have your rights automatically restored. It's not automatic. You just got to pay fines and everything else. You know who the committee chair of the Criminal Justice Committee of the Senate who actually put in the implementing bill? It was the senator of this district, Keith Perry, that messed it up. And he double talked because I was one of the strong advocates of Amendment 4. And in talking with him, I said, Senator Perry, this is going to come before your committee. What's going to be your position? Oh, I support it 100%. I say, now your committee is going to be responsible for the implementation language of how it implements. Because just because something passed, the legislature had to put in place the implementing language of the amendment. So, and oftentimes it's different from what the people voted for. Amen. Not just that, they don't believe in democracy, so guess what they do? They make it difficult for citizens to put any amendment on the ballot, yet they put any amendment they want on the ballot for you to vote on. In addition to that, they made it harder. They've made it harder now for organizations and people to actually put amendments on the ballot. But yet, when the people do it, they thwart the people's will. Look at Fair Districts, Florida. Redistricting is going on right now. One of the main things I'm paying close attention to because I have a vested interest in that. And I may end up being a party to a lawsuit, depends on how the districts are drawn. But they changed the will of the people. They changed the will of the people on numerous occasions. Fair Districts, Florida. What about the minimum wage? What about the minimum wage? Did they change the will of the people on the minimum wage? Yes, they did. There's another one. What about the act where the people voted to allow the documentary stamp tax dollars to go for affordable housing in the state of Florida? We passed that sometime, I think in 92, 93. So that means when you do a real estate transaction, the documentary stamp tax, some of that goes to the affordable housing piece. They have rated affordable housing since 1987. So that means Ocala, Marion County, the Housing Authority, people who get money from the state for affordable housing. This particular last session, they divided the money in thirds, and they're funding in perpetuity projects that have nothing to do with affordable housing. You want to know who supported that? The senator who represents this district. The senator that represents this district did that to Marion County. So, to me, I believe in democracy. They don't believe in democracy. I believe in democracy, and I'll fight for democracy. I also believe when it comes to Medicaid expansion, there are 1.5 million people in the state of Florida right now that could have Medicaid if former Governor Scott and the current governor of the state of Florida, DeSantis, and the legislature would pass Medicaid reform. 1.5 million people can have access to medical health care in the state of Florida. And there are many people right here in this city, in this county, that can have access to Medicaid. But because it came out of the Affordable Care Act, or as we call Obamacare, they won't pass it. That's morally wrong. And I'm going to hold them accountable when I get to Tallahassee. Now, I believe in science too. I believe in science. I do believe that our planet is warming. Contrary to what they think or say, look at the things that are happening in our world today. How many of you go to Miami every once in a while down on the coast? Anybody go down to Miami? When there are rainstorms in Miami, guess what happens? When the sea level rises. Anybody go down to Miami? The seawater comes through the drains of the road because you're at sea level now. You're not above sea level. You're at sea level. Now, a rain event, a hurricane at any given time can wipe out South Florida because the climate, the change that we have now in our climate in the last 20 years, and it's partly our fault because of mainly for fossil fuel, destroying our ozone layer. So we got to be more caretakers of our planet for our children and our grandchildren. So I support the president's initiative. But in Tallahassee, they don't believe in science. They don't believe in global warming. They don't think it exists. So I'm going to hold them accountable. When I go to Tallahassee, say it does exist. The science does exist. And they also don't believe in science when it comes to COVID-19. Now, how many people does it take to die from COVID for you to understand the science says that if you do certain things, getting a vaccination, wearing a mask, social distancing when possible, those things can prevent you from dying. And you have it now to where the people who are accountable at the local level, like the school districts, who want to take in consideration the health and the safety of their teachers and their students, they can't even pass a resolution or ordinance to have people to be mandated to wear a mask. This special session we just had last week in Tallahassee, that cost the people $75,000 a day to go up there to put in something called, what was the name DeSantis called? Oh, with something for Florida with whatever. It's just a political ploy. We have people still dying. And folk, there's another variant coming that we do not know what the impact is going to be in the next 6 months. So I believe in the science. I also believe in poverty reduction. Now, one of my personal beliefs and policies is I believe in people who are poor, because I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to have welfare cheese and those. I understand what that means. I understand what it means to be homeless. I understand those things. When I was on the Gainesville City Commission, when I was on the County Commission in 2003, I took the opportunity to go 48 hours being homeless so that I can begin to understand what policies need to be put in place to be homeless. I left the cell phones, left everything it is, and I went out and I met a person who was homeless, and for 48 hours, I understood what it meant. I caught pneumonia because the last night I was out, it poured rain, and I got soaking wet and sick. But I'm 48 hours homeless. These people every day homeless. So I put in place a plan called the 10-year plan to eliminate homelessness for Gainesville, Alachua County. I authored that plan. And part of the plan was to understand that homelessness means you got to find ways to house people. Because technically in America, if you don't have a place of your own, technically you're homeless. And you won't believe the people who are most homeless today are women and children. And they're homeless for a lot of reasons. Some of them are reasons that deal with marital problems or what have you. If you're sleeping on auntie or grandma's sofa, you're homeless. So we put in place a plan to feed homeless. We built a one-stop center to deal with homelessness so we can deal with all their social issues, social challenges. And I noticed Ocala is beginning to have a real big problem here with homeless. I can help you fix that because I've gone through it. I've worn the scars. And believe me, the public policy makers, and this is what I'm saying for my good friend, the councilman, it's going to land at your doorstep one day if it ain't already landed there. And they're going to be looking for the city of Ocala to do something. And the politicians are going to push back and not want to do anything because the people who got the power don't want you to do nothing. And see, this is what I say about accountability. You got to stand up for what's right, even if you're the only person standing for what's right. So I'll be able to help you when it gets to that. The other thing that I'm so engaged in is food insecurity. And you got food insecurity in Marion County, we got it in Alachua County. My foundation, the Loan Foundation, every year we do a big Thanksgiving food drive and we give away baskets and all that every year. And I started in 2008 when I was on the county commission. And the concept is we have the whole community to collect food because November is National Hunger Month. You do it in the month of November. All the government, the faith community, they collect food, they bring it to this big distribution center and we distribute the food and give it to our food banks and pantries. Then we work with our other food providers like Farm Share, people like that. And we bring in food and we give food to people who are hungry. Then I go out and raise money through my foundation to raise money for turkeys and food that'll make a Thanksgiving basket. This past Thursday, last Thursday, we gave out 2,000 Thanksgiving baskets to families because I'm committed to that. And I put my money where my mouth is. So to me, when it comes to doing things, I got a proven track record. I don't have to tell you, you can read this, that's fine. But come ask me about an issue. My years of experience in life, I've done it. I've been at the national level. As a matter of fact, in 2011, After serving as president of the Florida Association of Counties for 2 years, I was invited to the White House to meet President Obama to talk about issues facing the counties, because I served 2 years as president of the Florida Association of Counties. Now here I am, a person, when I look back from where I started in Porter's Quarters to sitting in the White House with the powerful person in the world, I knew that God had something for me in my life. And I'm not finished. My next goal is to go to Tallahassee and be the voice for the people in Alachua, Marion, and Putnam County. But I'm gonna need y'all help. You need to tell everybody you know who I am. I'm gonna need for all of you to become advocates and ambassadors for me. This is my information. I got a website. It's on the card. Whitfield and Loretta, Reverend Cummins and Councilman Bethea, they know me. They can vouch for me. I don't have an ego about politics. I've been in politics since 1988. As a matter of fact, I was the first district commissioner to be elected in Gainesville. And the reason I got that is because I changed the charter. You know how hard it is to change the charter of a city of Gainesville? Any charter? It's hard. But it's not as hard as you think. If you are smarter than they are and they don't know, it's not hard at all. You got to have the will of the people. If the people will sign a petition to change the charter and you raise money, create a PAC, raise money, go out and educate the voters, they'll vote your way. We changed the charter. And the reason we changed the charter is because we had blacks who kept running and running and running for city council but could never win. But in all the districts that were black, they won. So working with the NAACP, at the time, the NAACP said, we're going to single-member districts across the state of Florida, and we're going to challenge them. And they were challenging, nobody was winning. So we got the data, went to the city commission. I talked with them and said, here's the data. Now, you got options. You can create on your own a charter review committee to create some districts that's fair, or we're going to sue you. They created a commission. I didn't want to serve on it because I wanted to make sure I can talk to all the people around. I didn't want to be in the city because I can't talk to you. I'm in the parliament. I got to be around you. So we did it. Changed the charter. This is 1986. And it went into effect in 1988. I didn't want to run because I didn't want to be boxed into the government thing. I wanted to stay outside so I can deal with people. But at the end of the day, based upon who was running, they were not going to be representative of us. So I ran and won. I was the first district commissioner, became mayor commissioner, served 6 years, served 12 years on the county commission, 2 terms as president of the Florida Association of Counties, so I understand local government. Local government is where I'm from. So, Madam Mayor, when you get elected, when you start running for government, I can assist you in any way, form, or fashion about any issue you want to when it comes to local government, because I consider myself an expert. I've served at the national level and at the state level and at the local level. So I can do that. But I want to go to Tallahassee. I want to represent you because I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. There's a big difference. I don't have an ego about politics. And my thing is this. I'm an independent person. I use my own thinking. I do my own research. And even if people who own my party, if their policies are bad and wrong, I'm not with that because of partisanship. I can reach across the aisle. I understand what it means to be able to collaborate. I understand what it means we're not in control, we're not in power. But I don't have a problem reaching across the aisle. If it's bad public policy, it's bad public policy. No matter who's presenting the policy. At least I can try to make bad public policy a little bit better. So I ask for your support. I appreciate your time. And I do want to be your voice for the people to represent Marion, Alachua, and Putnam County. Thank you for allowing me to have time.
Brother Long, and you do have the support, I believe, of those who are here. And as an ambassador, we're going to seek more support and more support to make sure that you are a voice in Tallahassee representing the people. And I'm just grateful for you taking that stand. Sometimes you have to go by yourself.
By yourself.
All by yourself. But we know that God is going to be with you and is going to order your steps. This time we're going to have Brother Whitfield to come back with the appeal, and then we're gonna ask Ms. Loretta Pompey Jenkins, my